She skinned him alive and fed his body to his children.
Alright guys, we're here at Cooking Crimes with Courtney Lynn. Today I have Nkoshi Lattimore as my guest.
Hi.
Alright, Koshi, so today we're going to talk about Katherine Knight. Katherine Knight was the first woman in Australia who was sentenced to life in prison for killing her partner and skinning him alive and feeding his body to his children.
Oh.
So, Katherine Knight was born in 1955 on October the 24th. She was born in Australia. She grew up having a bad life. Her mom and dad divorced, or they separated, and she had a hard life growing up. She had to steal and make a way of life. So she eventually got a job at a meat factory where she was like a butcher. So she met a guy and they got together and had a child. 2 children actually. But she was so violent to this guy. She was always stabbing him, always going to jail for domestic violence and everything against this one guy until he eventually left her. So when he left her, she had a little baby and she didn't want the baby no more because he left her. So she put the baby on the railroad track so the baby can, be killed by the train. But home buyers looked at her and grabbed the baby, and she eventually lost custody of her child. And that was her first run-in with the law when it comes to child endangerment. So she also was trying to get help from the people at the welfare office for her mental health because she knew she wasn't right in the head. They never did help her. They kept turning her away. They deemed her as crazy. So she met a guy named John, and she was really in love with him. They also had a domestic violence situation. He never wanted to marry her. She was like so in love with him, and he just was like, I wasn't gonna marry her because he knew how crazy she was. So one day, John has 4 or 5 children, and one day he took the children and introduced them to Katherine. So Katherine took liking to the children. She did everything she could to try to make this man marry her. So she took the kids, and I don't know, they just say she took them away. We don't know where she took the kids. So when John got back home that night, he was looking for his children. He was calling Katherine, calling her, and she never answered the phone. And until she just showed up at the door one night without the kids, he was like, where are my children? She was like, they're safe. So he was so tired that he had to wake up and go to work in the morning. He had perfect attendance at work. And Katherine came in, she seduced him, she made love to him and everything. And, they were cuddling that night. Something inside of her mind snapped. She stabbed him while he was sleeping. He tried everything he could do to get out of that bed and get away. So you would see his bloody body part like sliding from the bedroom to the front door. When he got to the front door, Katherine, he knocked her out first. So when she came back to her senses, she found him at the front door. And that's when she stabbed him like overkill, like so many times. Like even after he was dead, she kept stabbing him. So he's at the front door, and she closes the door, and his hand some kind of way touches the door. So as he's at the front door, she decapitates his body in pieces, all kind of pieces. And she knew that the little knife that she had wasn't working. So she went out of the house and went and got her butcher's kit from her job where she, kills animals for a living. So when she got the butcher's kit, she came back and she severed his head off completely. She took his body and skinned it from head to the middle of his groin and took all his skin off his bones, like in such a clean manner. She took the skin from his body and draped it over a wall that made it like a curtain as you go into the wall. So she took all his body parts. First of all, she put his head in the closet, in a bag. And she took his other body parts and she made this full course meal of different foods with vegetables and sides of all these different, like stews and pot roasts and all kind of, like she sat in the kitchen all night and cooked this man to death. So what she did was she made a pretty spread. She made place cards for all of his kids to eat his body parts as dinner. So the next morning, he didn't show up for work. Of course, he has perfect attendance. So they're like, where is he? He made the joke months before that, hey, if anything ever happened to me, Katherine did it. So one of his coworkers called for, for the police to go and check on him for a welfare check. And when they made it to the house, nobody answered the door, nobody was home. So they saw the blood where his hand had kind of like slid against the door. So that's when they bust open in the door. The two cops that went inside, they saw like the bloody watermark where his body was there. And they just walked over it. Behind the couch was Katherine with like stab wounds all over her body. So they called for the ambulance to come get her. Seeing her in the blood puddle right by the door, they called for backup. So they searched the house, looking for any sign of an intruder or anything. So when a police officer went towards the back of the house, he raised his curtain up. That's when he walked into the kitchen, and he saw the blood drip from the closet. And when he opened the closet, John's head rolled out. It was wrapped up. And he saw this spread of all this food. And he was like, it looked like somebody was having just a normal dinner that night. How could this go wrong? And so as he started looking at the food, he realized he had blood on his arm. He was like, hey, where did this blood come from? And the curtain that he thought he went through was actually John's skin hanging over the door. It was so gruesome. So they finally got the ambulance there to take Katherine to the hospital. At this time, they didn't know that she was the one who killed John. So they're questioning her. They're like, what happened? What happened? So she had some kind of psychotic breakdown where she thought somebody was trying to kill her, but she was trying to kill herself so she may have to face her consequences. Yeah. So they really found out what had went on because John's friends and family had told authorities how crazy him and Katherine's relationship was. And they arrested Katherine for his murder. Now, Australia is not very hard on women when it comes to crime, but this crime was so gruesome that Katherine just happened to be the first Australian woman to serve life in prison without the possibility.
What year was this?
This was in 2001.
God damn.
Yeah. Yeah, so Katherine Knight is really dangerous when it comes to this. She's the epitome of, if I can't have you, no one can. Yeah. So tonight's dinner is a lobster linguine drenched in wine sauce with crabs and mussels. How is it?
That's amazing.
All right, guys. Well, stay tuned for next week. We'll see what other crimes we have to cover. Y'all have a great night.